Hello, welcome back to the channel. So today we're in Nelson Ghost Town. I've been here for a couple of days now. I've been doing some night photography, also did some stuff during the day. So today is our last day that we're going to be here, and we're going to try to get a few shots, some of the kind of iconic shots, but also a few things that are a little bit different. There are some old Jeeps, so as you saw in a previous video, I have a Jeep, so I definitely want to do some light painting on those. And we'll see what else we can find over the course of the night. Based on what comes out, there'll be a slideshow at the end that'll show you the various photos that I got during the course of the evening. In terms of equipment, what I'm using, basically almost any camera lens will do. I'm using a 24-70. I'm around f8, so the fact that you're shooting f8, just about every lens out there will do f8. And then in addition to that, just standard flashlight. I've got a gel on mine just to make the light a little bit warmer, but you can always adjust that in post-processing as well. So let's see what we get. So just some of the cool things that are out and around here. We've got some of these old buildings. Of course, there's a whole bunch of things like these gas pumps and that are out here as well. One of my favorites is the water tower, and I did photograph that last 2 nights, so you'll definitely see that within the video itself. Let's see some of the other things going on. There's Lori over there. And now just to come back around, so if you do come out to Nelson, this building right here is where you would check in. They're normally only open until about 5:30. We got permission to be here afterwards, so that's why we're able to do this at night. I believe you can make those arrangements to do that. Show you one other place that I thought was pretty interesting that we photographed last night. I was really happy with the results that we came out with from it. And that's this old barn that's down here around the corner. In fact, you could see some people getting set up to photograph it tonight. So pretty cool location. We actually lit it up from the inside last night, and it was a little bit of work. It actually was 4 of us collaborating on that to do it. But you know, as you look at this, you could see that you know, it is just a really beautiful old structure. And then down behind it is where I believe where they've got the Jeeps. And so we'll be taking a run down there as well. So before I get into this shop, I wanted to mention how we had access. As I mentioned earlier, we had access to be here at night. This was actually part of a night photography workshop put on by Cape Night Photography. Tim Little and Ken Lee were the 2 people running it. They did a fantastic job. I did put a link in the description if you're interested in looking at some of the other stuff that they do. But they did a really nice job. And even though I've been teaching night photography and light painting for quite a few years, I still learned a few new tricks through this one. So definitely well worth it. And I really did enjoy my time with those guys. So let's talk now about the water tower and the truck and why I selected this. Part of it has to do with the fact that I am from Minnesota. Hamm's Beer is a Minnesota brand, so it just kind of resonated with me from that perspective. And my plan was to try to isolate the tower and the truck and try to keep the background distractions to a minimum. And one of the things that I've found in the past is by spending time during the day at the location that you're planning on shooting at night, you get a pretty good appreciation for what the distractions are and how you might want to frame things up. And in this case, you can see there's another vehicle kind of behind it. So it just tells you what you need to be aware of it as you're doing your light painting. The great thing about light painting is you can really minimize your distractions by not putting light back there, since you really have a lot of control over the light. Now, for the shot that I ended up capturing on the first evening, this was a single shot, 87 seconds, f8 24 millimeter. and ISO 200. And you're probably wondering, well, how did you set a shutter speed of 87 seconds and how did you come up with that? My approach with light painting typically is to just set the camera to bulb mode, and that way by having the shutter speed at bulb, I can use my remote and just leave the shutter open while I go and work. I found that I get better results in going with like a 30-second exposure and trying to rush to get everything in. Now the downside is that may come out a little bit too bright if you're doing it for too long, but as long as you're not blowing things out, you could always darken, and that does give you a bit of a cleaner image anyway. I started with the tank, and the challenge here was basically the direction. And one of the things in light painting and photography in general is having the light coming from directly behind the camera is typically not optimal. You lose a lot of detail in that. But that was the only place that I could actually shine the flashlight up and be able to light that up. So I ended up doing that from directly behind, actually probably about 5 feet behind the camera. And then I moved in underneath. The next part was to really look at the water tower itself. So from the left side, as you're looking at it, almost at 90 degrees, I lit that up, as well as the underside of the platform. That gave me a lot of nice detail in the timbers, and I think that worked out pretty well. I then walked right next to it. I couldn't get underneath it. I probably could have, but it would have taken too much time. Reached underneath and lit up the sign from directly below. That allowed me to put a lot of light on the sign, but keep the light off of the structure itself. And then the last thing was the tank truck itself. And that I did at about a 45-degree angle. Again, from that same left side of the photo, that allowed the fronter part of the truck to be a little bit brighter, the tank to be a little bit darker. And I was then able to then move in to do the inside. And I just reached in with the flashlight and just basically lit up the various parts, just keeping the flashlight pointed down, and just the light bouncing off the floor and everything else was enough to light up the back and that. Finally, I went around the front and did just a little pop of light in each of the headlights just to make it look like they were turned on. And you're probably wondering, if this was all lit from the left side, why are the shadows going to the left? And the reason for that is the full moon. So the full moon actually was causing shadows, and I kind of like that effect. The only shadow that doesn't really make sense with it is the shadow from the headlight, which is going in the wrong direction, and that was just from that pop of light. So in general, I did like the fact that I did have some nice isolation of the water tower and the truck. Really kept the distractions to a minimum. But there were a few things that did kind of bother me. Now, this was shot with a 14 to 24 millimeters, so 24 millimeters was the longest focal length that I had available. It's really dusty, so I didn't really want to change lenses out there. But realistically, I didn't realize that I was just kind of a little bit too much distortion, and I really needed a longer focal length. And then the other thing that bothered me was that shadow from the headlight. So I decided to retake the photo, and I switched lenses using my 24 to 70 as opposed to the 14 to 24. I was able to use a focal length of 45 millimeters. And this really helped a lot with the distortion. There's still a little bit there, but definitely much, much better. The exposure, a little bit shorter, 81 seconds. Again, because I'm shooting in bulb mode, it's really how long it takes me to actually do the light painting. I did have to be a little bit further back, so unfortunately that did cause me to have to change the angle, so I no longer had that little bit of a side shot of the truck, which I did like in the first one, but that was a compromise that I needed to make here. It also brought the buildings into the frame, which actually I think I like better than not having them in there, as it does tend to give a little bit more complete story. The moonlight did a really nice job of lighting all the things in the background, so I didn't have to worry about getting light on those. So both the hills in the background as well as the buildings, that was just moonlight that lit those up. The only other difference in approach from the previous shot was, instead of using my flashlight to light paint the inside of the cab, I took an LED panel set at 1% with a white balance of 4,000 Kelvin and just put that on the seat inside the cab, pointed straight up. And I did have to bring that down a little bit in post-processing. It was still a little bit too bright, but I thought it did a little bit nicer job and did save me a little bit of time. I also didn't do the headlight pop. Now you see there is still a little bit of shadow from that one headlight, and that was just from light painting the front of it from that 45-degree angle. So not as big of a shadow as what I had before, so definitely something that was livable. Let's talk a little bit about the barn image. And one of the things I really liked about the barn was the fact that there were separations or gaps between the boards. And so I thought that would look really nice with the light shining through the various boards and out the top. And the challenge was going to be how to go about providing enough light inside the barn to really kind of get that effect. 3 of us went inside the barn, and using LED panels set at 100%, 4,000 Kelvin, we basically assigned different parts of the barn to each of us, and we just threw light on every surface that we could find. Ceilings, back walls, side walls, objects that were inside. And the whole idea was to try to get as much light shining inside as possible. We even threw some back towards the front wall to try to get some coming through the cracks. And that seemed to work pretty nice. The overall exposure ended up being over 260 seconds. This also gave us kind of the nice effect of having the star trails as well showing up in the sky. So a little bonus that really wasn't planning on. Now that we had the inside of the barn lit up nicely and we had the light coming through the way we wanted, we then needed to do the outside. And for the outside, the idea here was there was an overhead light hanging up in the peak, and we were able to find the light switch for that. So with no other lights, we sent somebody in to flip that light on for 5 seconds and then flip it back off again. That provided some light. We tried a few other things on the outside too, but quite frankly, just didn't like those. So ended up going with this shot for the exterior. Then brought the 2 photos into Photoshop, opened them as layers, selected the 2 layers, made sure that they were aligned using the auto align function just in case the tripods got bumped, and then used the lighten blend mode to bring the 2 together. We then had our final image, or I should say I then had my final image. At this point, I just edited that as if it was any other raw file. Darken the sky, darken the foreground, but otherwise pretty minimal processing on this. There were a couple of signs on the front door of the barn that I didn't like. I thought they were kind of distracting, so I did remove those in Photoshop. One thing I did think about doing, you'll notice there are a couple of bright spots or hot spots across the front. Initially I was going to clean those out, but I decided I actually like those. It kind of gave the impression that there were lights on inside, individual light bulbs that were maybe shining through. So I ended up liking that, so I kept them. Overall, I spent 3 days in Nelson and had a lot of other photos that I took, a lot of other subjects, and I put together this slideshow. So here are some of my favorite shots from those 3 nights. thanks for watching. I hope that you really enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit like. And if you'd like to be notified about more, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button and that little bell, and you'll receive an email whenever a new video is put out there. So thanks a lot. Bye.